Our first inductee, Stephen D. Edwards, is a 1984 Glendale High School graduate. In high school, Steve's appreciation of the great outdoors led him to become president of the Glendale Students for Environmental Action Club. That passion continued to serve him well as he began his career at Cox as a member of the grounds crew. He continued with Cox Health as an ER orderly, and after furthering his education, he worked in numerous administrative roles. It's his commitment to those in need that still drives him today as president and CEO of Cox Health. Steve gives back to his community through numerous civic activities, including being a founding member of the Community Blood Center of the Ozarks. He currently serves on the Drury University Board of Trustees. He's also on the Borough Behavioral Health Center and the Missouri Hospital Association boards. Direct your attention to the screens and join me in watching a video which highlights Steve's life through interviews with family and friends.
Steve and I, actually it's a pretty funny story. Steve and I met in second grade when we were 7 years old. First day of school, I had just changed schools and I was getting on the school bus and I didn't know anybody. And I looked at the back of the bus and there was this gentleman reading the Springfield News Leader in the back of the bus. And I said, I think that guy needs to be my friend. So that's how we met.
I've known Steve, because I worked for Steve for only a year, but I've known Steve for many years. Consider him not only a personal friend, but also a professional colleague. He was very active in the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, where I served for a lot of years and was a former board member, former officer, a tremendous leader in the chamber. So that's when we really became well acquainted years ago as a result of his chamber involvement.
I know Steve through my involvement with the Cox Health Board. I've been a member of the board for about 16, 17 years, and currently I serve as chairman of the board and work with Steve basically on a weekly, sometimes daily basis.
I think for a lot of reasons. Number one, Steve is absolutely hilarious. We share a lot of things in common in terms of love of outdoors, friends in common. He's probably one of the most ethical and moral people I've ever met. He is very loyal to his friends, and did I tell you he has a great sense of humor?
He's a tremendous leader, and I say that with all sincerity. He leads by example. He truly believes in servant leadership. He believes in serving others is a mark of a leader. But I think the capstone above all else is his ethics. I mean, they're beyond reproach. He reeks with integrity. Every decision that he makes is made with integrity. He has the highest of integrity. And I think that's why, among many other leadership qualities, he's so admired and respected by his colleagues here at Cox Health.
Steve's very creative. Not only being very bright, he's very creative. What I always like to say is that I've always felt like Steve can see around the corner. A guy that can see around the corner knows what's coming at him before it gets there and before he gets there. He's done a very good job of positioning Cox Health in terms of the future. We're going to be around for a long time. With Steve Edwards' leadership and those that he works with, the future of Cox Health in Springfield, Missouri is really strong and very vibrant.
Steve, I just want to tell you that I'm incredibly proud to be your friend for 42, almost 43 years. And I can't think of a more worthy recipient of this award than you. And I'm so happy for your whole family that they have the opportunity to see you receive this recognition. And I'm so proud of you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Broaddus. Before I go a bit further, that was not Steve's freshman picture. That was his senior picture that you saw. And I looked just the same pretty much when I was a senior, so I think we shared that in common. I'm a teacher at Kickapoo High School. As Yogi Berra might have phrased it, Steve Edwards and I have known each other since before we knew each other. Our fathers met while attending Sedalia Smith Cotton High School in 1949. They became friends again in 1964 when both found themselves in Springfield, Missouri. Charlie Edwards was a hospital administrator at Cox. My dad, a new doctor in town. Steve and I were born 3 days apart in October of 1965, which tells you how old we are. In a couple of days. Our first meeting, however, I'd heard of Steve Edwards my whole life, well, life up to junior high, was on a junior high basketball floor. Steve played for Hickory Hills Spartan. I played for the Pershing Generals. We were both little, so tenacity is part of the game. I don't know how it happened. I was on a breakaway layup. Steve was behind me at full speed, and somehow I ended up into the wall under the basket. So that was our first meeting. There was no harm, probably a foul, but no harm, no blood. A couple of years later, we met for real at Glendale High School as freshmen, eventually becoming great friends. I knew him at first as Big E, a name he brought from Hickory Hills. Later, he simply became Ed, and to be honest, today, when I see him, he's Ed. So I could not have asked for a more loyal friend, and all of his friends here that date back to high school. It's the same. Steve Edwards is one of the most driven people I have ever met, and I felt that way since I met him back in junior high, actually. Even as a kid playing shortstop, he would rather take a ground ball in the chest or even in the teeth rather than let it go by him. He would lay down in front of it almost. Going by me was fine, but not with Steve. No matter the setting, he has always challenged himself and others to be the best that they can be. Early on, I noticed that Steve possessed a very quick wit and a keen analytical mind, which he shares with Miss Jan, who was in the video. I couldn't keep up with those two. I want to tell you one story. One night in October 1981, when we were almost 16, a bunch of us, and some of us may be here in the room, camped out at a friend's house. About 2 in the morning, of course, in those kinds of places you don't sleep much. Rather than telling a traditional ghost story, like with a hook or whatever the traditional ghost story was, Steve started in with this story. You know, guys, Anwar Sadat got assassinated a couple days ago, and his funeral is going on right now in Egypt, right now with the time change. All world leaders are there right now. They could be wiped out all in one spot, and World War III could start tomorrow, and we might never wake up. The world could end. And I thought, what? Only Steve, only Ed, yes. Steve is a passionate, compassionate, and humble leader. Born to do this job that he is doing, he cares deeply about the people at Cox Health and about all people, both patients and employees. He instinctively knows that patient care is the priority, but that without employees at all levels feeling connected to their work and valued, patient care will suffer. He leads by example, with humility, and with compassion to all involved. Lastly, Steve is a dedicated family man, even with the immense responsibilities of his position. He cherishes the time he spends with his wife, Jennifer, and his children, Annabelle, Charlie, and Madison. He loves them deeply, and I know they are proud of him, as am I, and as are all of his friends that date back even further than me. I know that his mom, Betty, is proud, and his sisters, Vicki and Debbie, Debbie's husband, Terry, and I know that his dad is proud too. I am sure that Steve is a bit embarrassed, but very pleased by this honor. However, I think it fair to say that even now, he would rather be sitting on his deck on a golden green summer evening, surrounded by his family, listening to the St. Louis Cardinals on the radio. Now, please welcome to the stage 2015 Hall of Fame inductee, Stephen D. Edwards, escorted by Glendale High School student, Hannah Life.
Well, to give you a flavor for Lauren Broaddus' character, when I slammed him into that wall, and I think we were down by 15 or 20 points, and the game was already out of contention, he got up and shook my hand and said, "Good play." He's just such a nice guy. His nickname has become Buddy because he is literally everyone's buddy. He's such a great guy. I am somewhat embarrassed and humbled because I look across this room and I think of so many people that I think are more deserving. And you struggle with that thought. Lauren is one of the finest history teachers you would ever come across. I will walk around sometimes, and there will be students that will come up, former students will come up, and they'll tell him thank you. You can tell by the look in their eyes that he changed them, changed the trajectory of their life even, that as a kind teacher that he is. Ms. Jan Holland, who did such a great job introducing so colorful, we have known each other since we were about that tall. And I don't think God has put more challenges to anyone I know than her, and she's met them all with this sort of invincible smile. A person like that deserves to be in here. And in the back of the room, there's 2 or 3 tables of hecklers led by Dr. Charlie Mace. And, Charlie Mace, and I see Kurt Brand, David Sam, I see a whole bunch. I won't name them all. I can't see them all from this far because I'm getting old. But, Charlie Mace, he is a brain surgeon, for goodness sake, and he's a really good one. And as I often say, really what I do, if you watch me with a time-lapse camera, in my job, it'd just be moving paper from the left side of my desk to the right side of my desk. It's not much going on, really, and these people are saving lives. I want to congratulate Tony and his family. It's such a pleasure. I got to meet you a couple years ago as he was doing Haitian relief work. He's a pediatric cardiologist that saves kids' lives, so I'm not in your company. And Susan, I can't imagine the thousands of people you've influenced. Several of my friends have told me what influence you've been on them, and so I know that there's a legacy with you as well. I want to thank the committee that made the selection. You did 2 for 3 is really good, and I would encourage you not to take a break and go to happy hour and make your last selection because impaired selections end up with people like me. So I do appreciate Julie and others. Thank you for your support. I know that Mrs. Bond, my 2nd grade teacher, would be flabbergasted and amazed to see me up here. I was a mess of a kid, especially at that age. In 2nd grade, I could barely read. By the beginning of 3rd grade, I could still barely read. I tried to memorize lines. I pretended to read. I would have kids, I'd say, well, how would you say that? And then I'd remember what they said, and then I'd repeat it back. I would duck and hide from the teacher. I would tell jokes. I'd go to the restroom. I did everything a kid would do who couldn't read in front of class. And finally, the gig was up, and I was sent to a learning disability class. And I may be the only inductee who's been in a learning disability class here. And I will tell you, back at my age, and things have changed, that was no place for a kid. I was ashamed. I was felt to be dumb. I was thought that I was not a hard worker because clearly everyone can read and you must not be working hard. And, and my heart was broken, and I came home every night, and I shut my door and I cried. And finally, one night, my mom, I must have figured it out. And this little 4'11", 3/4-inch woman who's with me today, rose up like a little bear and told the school that he is not going back to that learning disability class. And if you choose to have him go back, he will not go back to that school. And she began to encourage them that she's going to take me off for testing, and I had lots of tests done, auditory processing test, hearing, vision, etc., and they couldn't find the solution and didn't know what happened. And finally, only later in life, when my sweet little Maddie Edwards was diagnosed with dyslexia, did it occur to me when the provider said, which one of you have it, because it's genetic, and so one of you have it too. And it occurred to me that that was it. And I can't imagine what my life would have been like if I didn't have people like my mom, and then a succession of teachers that made this enormous difference for me. And so while it's uncomfortable to receive this recognition, I feel great that I can thank these many people who made a difference in my life. So teachers like Mrs. Headley and Fisher and Beach and Cordray and Dry in elementary school, who they didn't know what was wrong with me, but they had this most important tool a teacher could have. They cared. And for some reason, it seemed like they cared for me. I know they cared for all the students, and that matters, but they were ill-equipped. There weren't the resources. It was like sending a soldier off to battle without armament or without weapons, but they cared. And for reasons that I don't understand, partly because my mom every night worked with me on phonics and listening to records and practicing, after a while I was suddenly reading the Springfield News and Leader. And while I've grown to admire the Springfield News and Leader, I read it less often today than I did then, actually. But that was through the work of people who loved and cared for me. My life was still a mess if you fast forward to about 7th grade. I was dedicated to play football, which scared my mother to death because I stood 4'10" and weighed 73 pounds with the coach's foot on the scale. I'm sure he was convinced if they knew my real weight, it would just invite aggression. And so he kind of pumped us up. And while I could thank so many teachers and influential leaders in my life, I want to focus on one who was somewhat emblematic of maybe all of them, who cared and maybe believed in me more than I believed in myself, and that's Coach Bill Grieve, who I'm delighted he's here today with us. Coach Grieve, thank you for being here. I wanted to play football, and he's a football coach. And football started before school did, and so I gave him every ounce of my 73 pounds of bone and tendon that a guy could give. And there's no muscle involved. And when school started, remember, for someone who has dyslexia, self-esteem is the biggest battle. You've lost it. And so all these teachers who gave me a sense of self-esteem were that was the answer. So in gym class, the first week of gym class, the pattern was you'd line every kid up. They'd have a white T-shirt on, and then Coach Grieve would write your name on front of the shirt so he could keep track of all of us. So Anderson, Baker, Carter, Donaldson. He got to me and he paused, and he wrote the letter E, and he put quotations around it. And he said, "You're Big E." And I was by far the smallest kid there. And then he went on, and he named everyone else by their full name. And I know it was just a small gesture, but that's how he taught. He gave me self-esteem. I was suddenly Big E. And to this day, occasionally people still call me that, which is really neat. But that sort of confidence and support I saw all the way through high school. I know that Mr. Wayne Nelson is here today, who is my geometry teacher, and I'm really grateful for him. For a dyslexic, and I didn't know at the time, you're really good at spatial relations. Geometry was awesome. I did really well at it. I sat next to Charlie Mace and did almost as well as Charlie did. That's how good I was. And so it's my chance to offer my gratitude and my thanks to the teachers and my plea, because I've got a room full of educators, to please recognize that there are many, many kids out there like me, like I was. Some national statistics say that 1 in 5 kids have dyslexia, 1 in 5. And if you realize that if a child has struggled learning and struggled reading early in life, they don't turn out well often. There was a study of British prisons that looked at male inmate population, and they discovered that 40 to 60% of that population has dyslexia. And so while I was surrounded by love and caring people, it could have very well been that trajectory of my life could have been spinning off into a world that was dark and a world that wasn't as positive as it's turned out to be. Those of you that are in a position to influence as teachers, as administrators, please equip our teachers with the tools they need to help them understand how to teach these kids with dyslexia. If you're a college president or in the college curriculum, teach our teachers how to deal with these kids with dyslexia. What's amazing to me, you can look at almost any field, and at the top of the field, you'll find there's someone with dyslexia. If it's movies, and it's Steven Spielberg, if it's computers and Steve Jobs, if it's Thomas Edison or Henry Ford or Winston Churchill, all people that had amazing accomplishments. And so I think of how many people out there, how many contributions didn't occur because it wasn't addressed. And so I take this opportunity as a proud recipient, and but most importantly as a dad who has a daughter with dyslexia, and I'd give my soul to help her. And I'll do the same for anyone else. I've got 3 amazing kids, and I'm really proud of them. And I've got a wife who adores me for reasons I will probably never understand, and I appreciate her support. And her family, her mother and father, who've been there for me as well. My sister and both sisters and my brother-in-law and my family and those hecklers in the back of the room. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Steve Edwards, ladies and gentlemen.